In the mirror, I looked like someone auditioning for forgiveness. Hair smoothed, the black dress that always reads as contrition, the necklace my mother gave me at 21 for becoming useful. Dinner at their apartment, just the three of us. My father's assistant had called in the afternoon to confirm the time. Voice syrup sweet, as if kindness could cancel everything that had happened on either side of the board table for the last 6 months. I slipped the clasp, told myself to believe in the smallest possible version of hope, that the brittle way my mother had said, "Let's talk about the future," might not be a trap. I was sliding into my coat when my phone lit the desk with a white rectangle that made my ribs tighten. "Call me immediately." No salutation, no punctuation, from Gabe. My stomach drew itself into a knot I recognized from every time I'd been told a delay would be just a week. I dialed. He answered on the first ring, his voice already pitched to the part where people stop wasting time. "Sloane," he said, all consonants. "They filed this morning." What? I had meant to sound composed. It landed like someone had taken the air out of the room. "Article 81 petition," he said, "Supreme Court, New York County. They're asking for appointment of an emergency temporary guardian over your personal needs and property. Your parents are asserting you're not competent to manage the company or yourself." My coat slid from my hands and found the floor with a sound so soft it felt like a betrayal. "You're kidding." "I'm reading the order to show cause," he said, not kidding. "Hearing is set for 7 days from now. They're also seeking a temporary restraining order to freeze your ability to move company accounts in the interim. Affidavits attached. Your mother, your father, the CFO, and one independent director whose name I never thought would appear on the wrong side of a caption." The room went 2 degrees colder. The lamp in the corner dared me to call what it casts light. I thought of my mother's gentle invitation 3 days ago, a tone she used for donors and cousins. I thought of my father's thin smile at the last board meeting, the one he made when he was sure he'd already won. "They planned this," I said. It wasn't even anger. It was that slow, chemical kind of recognition your body does when poison turns out to be the color of lemonade. "Yes," Gabe said, and didn't add anything soft to cushion it. "They're moving fast." On the counter, the bakery box I'd picked up from ore washers on my way home sat looking ridiculous. Rugelach I'd meant as a peace offering. Cinnamon and apricot like the ones my mother used to slip onto my plate when she wanted me to keep talking about school. The little white box now felt like evidence in a case study about how nostalgia is the most efficient solvent for judgment. I sat on the bench by the door and watched the phone keep its glow like a smug thing. Dinner wasn't an invitation, it was a staging ground, and I had been invited so I could play the part they'd written for me. Reasonable, pliable, desperate to believe. The prodigal daughter with excellent earnings per share. "You need to come in," Gabe said. "I've got a copy of the petition and the exhibits. We'll triage. I want to file a cross motion and affidavits before close of business tomorrow." I nodded, remembered he couldn't see me, said, "I'm coming." His office on Lower Fifth has a view of the kind of brick that calms you, the serious New York kind that says, "People were competent here before you." He had the folder open on the table before I could sit, its red tab like a wound you can't stop touching. On top, verified petition for the appointment of a guardian for the person and property of Sloane Elaine Barrett. "Read," he said. And I did, even though every line bruised. Erratic leadership, emotional volatility, inability to sustain judgment in high-pressure environments. The words were not sloppy, they were curated. They cited a handful of meetings in which I'd interrupted my father and a compensation committee session where I said no to a bonus structure he'd floated for, this killed me as I read it, executive continuity. "That's your father's language. He writes in crosswords." "Keep going," Gabe said. Quiet, like a person holding open a door you don't want to enter. Statements signed by people who should have known better. A witness claiming I'd forgotten key dates. Another that I dismissed data in favor of gut instinct. They'd backed the petition with printouts of my mother's emails to the board expressing concern. The tone was clinical, the cadence kind. My parents had always been gifted at tone. They didn't do this alone, Gabe said when I closed the folder. Two investors submitted letters of support for temporary stabilization. They liked the sound of familiar names with pens. My jaw tried out a grind and decided against it. I said, if the court grants temporary control, they freeze me. They could, he said. Banks get jumpy at a stamp. That's why we get ahead of it. I want medical evaluations. I want audited performance. I want anything boring that turns their adjectives into a lie. I thought of the last 6 months. My mother's light laugh at an offsite when she told our head of HR, Sloane forgets things lately, like we were emptying the dishwasher and she'd misplaced a measuring cup. My father's habit of finishing my sentences in public, like my pauses were proof of lack. The independent director leaning across the table, kind eyes, and saying, maybe pace yourself, after my father told him I'd been stressed. It had been a program, not a series of mistakes. They'd been sanding down my credibility in front of an audience, small enough to be plausible and big enough to be useful.
We'll need physician's letters, Gabe said. Neurocognitive evaluation, full stop. Psych, if you're willing. And I want exhibits that read like math. Revenue, margins, retention, major deals closed under your signature. The petition paints a picture. We bring a ledger. The word ledger felt like a handrail. Okay, I said. I'll call Dr. Hahn. She saw me last fall after I did 3/4 on 4 hours of sleep. And Sloane, he added, gentler now, be ready for noise. They'll throw anecdotes. They'll stage concern. They'll try to make you fight inside their frame. Don't. I walked out with the folder under my arm the way I left dress rehearsals in high school, sore from using muscles I didn't know existed, wrist stamped and visible with responsibility. Back at the office, my corner felt like a room whose furniture had been rearranged just enough that you keep bumping your hip against a table you used to clear without thinking. I started making piles with the kind of authority you only get when you decide to reorganize something no one else will ever see: medical, financial, client, leadership. 2 years of clean neurocognitive screenings from Dr. Hahn and Dr. Patel, both of whom I'd seen because my body had been reminding me this was dangerous work. I texted their offices, asked for letters that said the words courts like to hear in the order they like to hear them. My hands reached for the performance metrics like muscle memory: 3-year revenue, EBITDA margins, client retention, churn by cohort. I printed charts not because judges love pictures, but because some truths look truer when they stand upright on paper. A knock at my door was the kind of soft that means someone is making a decision right there in the arch of their knuckles. Come in, I said. Noah Quinn, one of the junior analysts, hovered like a kid who got into an adult pool on a dare and was now treading with determination. He held a sheet of paper like it had a temperature. Miss Barrett, he said, voice too low for comfort. You should see this. He didn't wait for me to read. He didn't want to be seen in here. Please don't say it came from me, he said, and was gone before I could tell him I would die before letting his name be a line in someone else's memo. I looked down, an email printed from the server. Subject line, transition planning. The body was short, trimmed to intimidate. Once we assume interim control, bonuses will be distributed accordingly. Thank you for your discretion. Signed, Evelyn Barrett. I read it twice and a third time because disbelief has rituals. Interim control. Not if, when. Bonuses promised in exchange for quiet? I pictured my mother's hand on the keyboard, the way she always typed with her jaws set like duty could make something right that wasn't. Bribery in a voice that could cut a wedding cake. The page shook a little, the way your body betrays you, and then steadied. For a week I'd been telling myself I was overreacting, that old line, you're dramatic, you're tired, you're too close. And here it was in print, a sentence you could lay on a courtroom table and ask it to answer a question out loud. I slid the email into a manila folder I labeled with an indelicate Sharpie. Evidence. The act of naming it felt like oxygen.
I took another breath and another after that, and my lungs agreed to keep going. I went to my apartment and turned the kitchen island into a battlefield. Binders sprouted like a city: medical, performance, governance, personal. The Rugalac box sat there, ridiculous and expensive, and I let it stay because sometimes you have to look at a thing you did out of love while you turn into a different animal. I laid out the clean physician letters first, the phrases that mattered to a court: alert and oriented X3, no evidence of cognitive impairment, executive function intact, decision-making capacity unimpaired. Then the charts, the tidy arc of growth that no one on the other side of a courtroom would be able to discredit without lying. On the next counter, I spread letters from clients, thank yous with signatures and dates that would hold still when the questions started. At midnight, I watched the video of my keynote from the Leadership Summit last year, 42 minutes without a single note, the part of me that likes facts purring at the rhythm of numbers I still knew by heart. I did not press play because I missed the applause. I pressed play because it was a record of a competent mind doing what it does when no one tells it to slow down. At 1 a.m., Gabe called. Judge assigned. No nonsense cold. Good for us. We'll need your affidavit by morning. Straight, unadorned, background, performance, health, the pattern of undermining, the email, attach it. We'll ask for sanctions if they push the freeze. What about the board? I asked, already writing my opening line in my head. Not yet, he said. They'll be in the room. Let them watch the judge read. The next day, the glass conference room on the 27th floor was humid with other people's fear. I walked past the reception desk with my binder like it had a strap, chin where it needed to be. There is a tone women learn for rooms like that, a calm slightly sharper than courtesy, and I hit it hard. Before I could close my door, the intercom clicked. Your mother, Jenna said, and I said, tell her I'm out, then added, and don't lie. Tell her I said no. It was petty, and I liked it, and I am not ashamed. By the afternoon, Dr. Hahn's letter had landed in my inbox with the precision you long for in all things: alert, oriented, no evidence of neurocognitive disorder, fit to manage complex professional responsibilities. Dr. Patel's letter followed. It stamped like the part where a song hits what it's aiming at. I printed both, slid them into the binder's first sleeve, and felt the way relief sometimes is just a matter of paper touching plastic. At 5, Jenna stuck her head in the door again. There are people, she said, eyes wide in a way that said she'd been asked to watch a play and didn't like the plot. I stepped into the hallway and found 2 men I didn't know, and a piece of paper I did, a copy of the order to show cause, served by hands that didn't feel like arms. I took it, thanked them like a person who has decided to be polite to the messengers of bad news, and shut the door. Before I left, I tucked the printed email from my mother into the front pocket of the binder so I could feel its weight when I carried it. In the elevator, a junior associate from legal asked me if I did it the off-site in Rhinebeck next week. Probably not, I said, and then smiled because sometimes you have to let someone believe the world they live in for another day. I didn't go to dinner. I texted my mother, not tonight, not ever like this again. She sent back a heart, then a question mark, then nothing. My father called. I watched his name ring out the way rain hammers a window in those old movies and looked down at the Rugalac. I put the box in the freezer like a small tragedy. Later, at home, I wrote my affidavit. I did not turn phrases into weapons. I made sentences into stares. I told the court who I am, what I do, what the company has done under my hand. I described the program of undermining without adding names, not because I am gracious, but because 30 seconds in a judge's chambers taught me what moves a person who lives on the far side of words. I attached what needed attaching: physician letters, performance charts, the email from Sloane Barrett. Once we assume interim control. When I finished, it was almost 2, and the city had that particular quiet New York does when you finally notice all the noise is inside the buildings, not the street. I stood by the window and could see the reflection of my small figure against the bigger one the glass made, and I thought, not for the first time, this was never going to be about them loving me correctly. This was going to be about me refusing to be erased because they misnamed what power is. I slept. Not well, but enough. Dreams came like paperwork I hadn't filed yet, forms without signatures, boxes I'd ticked in a color that didn't match. I woke to a sky that had decided to be gray, and a text from Gabe, filing at 9, dress like you respect your own binder. At 8, Noah left a folded note on my chair like a small act of treason against the wrong empire. It said, "There's more." He had printed the CFO's talking points memo. It was a single page of sentences built to let cowards sleep, messaging if asked, stress narrative, leadership continuity. At the bottom, a line that made my hands go flat on the desk. If necessary, explore bonuses to encourage transition cooperation. I slid the paper under the Rugelach box on the counter like we were roommates, and I needed to hide something from someone who cleaned too well. I stood very still for half a minute, and then I felt something click, a gear into a different tooth, a spine finding itself. I put on the dress I wear when I need numbers to behave, the shoes I wear when I need to believe the floor will hold, and I picked up the binder. It was heavier than last night, which is probably not possible, and also exactly true. I stepped into the hallway that had sounded like shoes going away from me, and mine made a sound I liked better. I was no longer going to dinner. I was going to court.